It is a beautiful day here in Chicago, and it is also been a very, very interesting week. Thank you again for joining us. This show is about real people, real life, everyday issues. This is Real Talk, and I'm Merle Huckabee. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a tempestuous week, very conflicting. We had victory on one hand in the Derek Chauvin verdict, yet we found ourselves grappling the same night for some others in the morning, the next morning, of another police shooting. We had that resulted in the death, the loss of another life, and that was of Makia Bryant. Now, a lot of controversy going on to say whether or not it's justified or unjustified, but I think it's about the respect for life. And when we have lost another life, that's tragic, no matter justified or unjustified. We have protests going on. We have a shooting that occurred also in North Carolina. Um, Here in Chicago, we have the Adam Toledo case that is being investigated. Of course, you know, Dante Wright's funeral was this past week. It's just been a very somber week in one sense. We also, last week here in Chicago, the 7-year-old girl, Jaslyn Adams, who was killed in the drive-through as she sat there with her father. Gun violence, gun violence. I mean, gun violence. And the week before, we had a 1-year-old that was shot out on South Shore Drive. I mean, we are experiencing a lot. It's a lot going on in the middle of a pandemic, COVID-19. And yet, these are the things that are really topping the news. We also have where the police here in Chicago, they shot the suspect, or one of the suspects, I'll say, according to the news sources. The Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown had said that they had a suspect and it was a vehicle chase pursuit. It was a crash and an attempted carjacking. What's going on? What's going on? So we have a lot to talk about. I think the conversation has to continue, as the White House and our president is saying. The work continues, but I think we're all a part of the solution. And I'm saying that because whether it's talks you have with your teenage children, talks that you have with your adult children, talks that you just have in general, the communication has to continue, but we've got to do some things differently. So I want to talk today. I have two guests and one that is joining me. It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to have him. This young man, I saw him by the way of Facebook. And I'm getting into this social media thing. I think I have told a lot of you that it's new to me. And I'm grateful for my technical producer, Anthony Greer, who he has really helped to take that load and that burden off of me. But I met this first guest, Philip Bynum is his name, and I like to call him Phil. I actually one day was just on Facebook on Worldview, the group that we belong to, and I saw this man riding on a bike with a helmet. And I'm like, okay, this is, of course it was later after he posted, and I thought it was an exercise video, to be honest with you. So when I tuned in and I listened to this brother, I have to be honest, I fell out of my bed. I was cracking up laughing, not because of what he was saying was funny. is his delivery. I mean, he keeps his ear to the ground. He must, I sometimes believe he's watching CNN and MSNBC and every news station, because he really knows what's going on around the world. And to hear his perspective and his commentary, the delivery of it, to me is just, it kind of fits with what I do and my personality. He says what most people are thinking. He's bold enough to say what it is that most people are thinking. A lot of people are thinking these things, but they're scared to say them. So I want to, and another thing that blew my mind about this brother, he introduced me to Petey Green, because he closes out, and I don't know, he'll correct me, his blogs and his recordings, he closes them out with a quote from Petey Green. Well, hell, I didn't know who Petey Green was. But he closes this out and he says, I'll tell it to the hot, I'll tell it to the cold, I'll tell it to the young, I'll tell it to the old. I don't want no laughing, I don't want no crying, and most of all, no signifying. Would you welcome Phil Bynum? Hi, Phil. How are you today? Thank you so much for joining Real Talk.
No, not a problem at all, Merle. Not a problem at all. It's my honor.
You are coming from El Mirage, Arizona.
Yes, I am.
That I was like jealous, because you riding this bike and you telling us what's going on in the world, and you telling us, first you start off telling us about the weather. And so I'm like, I'm jealous. Where is he? And, that's when I caught on what you were saying. Phil, tell us a little bit, my viewers, a little bit about you.
Well, I originally come from a small town in Pennsylvania called Meadville, south of Lake Erie, Pennsylvania, that area, near the panhandle of Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania. At the age of 12, my parents, for some reason, wanted to move south. So we moved to Greensboro, North Carolina, for all places. My mother, I don't know if some of you don't remember, but on November 3rd, there was an incident at Morningside Homes in Greensboro. My mother, she's my second mother actually, but still mother.
Yes.
Well, she used to work at this educational facility over there. And on November 3rd of 1980, I believe, 1979, there was a Klan shootout. And they killed a couple of people who were protesting and whatnot.
Wow.
And, it for me, that's what introduced me into the world for which we live in now.
Yes.
See, in Meadville, Pennsylvania, Meadville's a very small town.
Okay.
Population maybe 17,000 back in the day. So basically, everybody got along. I mean, why not? We were surrounded in the mountains and Allegheny mountains range there, and everybody just got along. White, black, Italian, Hispanic. I even I had a good friend from France.
Everybody knew each other.
Everybody knew each other, and it was a community. It was a community, and I didn't really know what racism was until I went south.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went south, I made a conscious decision. I said, while I'm there, I'm going to be there. And while I was there, I got my education at North Carolina A&T State University. As you know, HBCU, one of the top architecture engineering programs in the country. And then after that, I went in the military, got out because of my knees, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I went ahead and I went back to school. I got another associate's degree in computer drafting and design, and also where I work now at Grand Canyon University, I got my master's in leadership.
Wow. You're a heavy brother. You're a heavy brother. I looked, at your credentials, and you're heavy. You're just heavy. I mean, And I was very impressed, looking at your resume. Just, man, I would think that you'd be a political reporter. I mean,
I'm saying I am.
and you are in a way. You are in a way, and what a hell of a way to be introduced, to racism. We, a lot of us, see the Ku Klux Klan in pictures, and I remember the Black Klansmen. That was an education because that was supposed to be a real story,
Right.
and it was.
Yeah.
And so, what a heck of a way to be introduced, and here we are in 2021, still dealing with it. It may be dressed up, they might be out of the sheets, but we're still dealing with some of the same foundational issues.
Oh yeah. We're dealing with stuff that not only the colonies but the nation was built upon.
Yeah.
And what people tend to forget is that we had the first civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
We had Mali, we had Egypt, we had all the great civilizations before you heard of a Mesopotamia or Rome or Greece.
Yes.
And there's a lot lost in that translation, and a lot of people just don't take the time. See, you mentioned that you looked at my credentials. The top credential I have is with something that my father taught me, and that is learn something every day.
That's right.
Be learning. I have a undying thirst for knowledge.
Yes.
And in that knowledge, I want my knowledge to be truthful. I don't want it to be somebody else's reality. I need to find the answers.
Yes.
I read the Bible. I have read parts of the Quran, the Torah, some Buddhist script, and found that they're all saying the same thing. God said, "Love one another."
Love one another.
He ain't saying nothing about love somebody if they look like you or this and that. You hear me on the broadcast. God said, "Love everybody."
That's right.
And nobody is over anybody, and nobody's under nobody.
That's right. That's
right.
right.
That's what the nation needs to go.
We're all equal in the eyes of God.
Oh yeah.
And if people would just recognize that, if they would just recognize that.
If people would recognize that, then this world would evolve to its next level of existence.
That's right.
That's it, and it's been shown throughout time. It has been shown when we pursue more, try to be more than who we are. Something about us that God made us takes the next step closer to Him.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. When I'm listening now, is it a blog? I want you to correct me. What do you consider what you're doing when you're on that bike? Because I know you're getting some exercise. Let me tell you that you're getting some exercise because your ride is about 20, sometimes 20 minutes, 25 minutes. What do you call what it is that you do?
Exercise would be a good thing, but you know what I do? I'm doing self-therapy.
I heard that. You're talking it out.
I'm talking it out because, for so many years before this advent of social media, these platforms that we utilize on a daily basis to get people's messages out, you had to sit there and say, you know what? I see this going on. I can't say what I want to say. This is in me.
Right.
See, right. And there's one thing about me, God speaks to me. I know a lot of people say that.
Yes.
A lot of people say that. God does put things in my heart to tell people.
Yes.
Okay. And as you see my broadcast, they can get a little colorful.
Yes.
we'll say colorful.
You don't, but you know what? That helps make it. That helps make your broadcast so unique and different. I mean, I won't lie. I was actually the first broadcast. I was in the bed and I was about to go to sleep, and I I hit on the page and I saw you and I was like, wait a minute, is he talking about exercise? And boom, you were talking about what was going on in the world. You know, at that time, we had somebody else in the White House that, thank God, he's not there anymore. But thank God that the trajectory of this country is going in a different direction. But you were talking about our former president. And, you know, of course, the comedians, everybody had enough material off of the things that he was doing and not doing to last a lifetime. You know, so I know I enjoyed you. My husband was like, who is that? I mean, I fell out the bed. I actually fell out the bed, you know, and again, it wasn't what you were saying, it was how you were saying it. And I liked your perspective because the truth is, when you're doing your broadcast, you're giving what factual things are happening and events that are happening, but you're putting your spin onto it. You're giving your perspective, but you're actually saying what a lot of people are thinking, but are scared to say.
Well, I see. I'm a common man. I'm a common everyday man.
Yes.
I may be, you know, I may be a little bit more learned than some, but that's somebody's choice as opposed to the alternative.
Right.
And because everybody has the propensity to learn anything, everything,
Yes.
all things.
Yes.
And I encourage people to always do that. But when it comes down to saying how I feel, I say this after having discussions with my wife. I say this after having discussions with friends, family, etc. See what's going on in the news. And yes, I do watch a couple different news stations for information, just to see who's on, you know, just to keep it real.
Right.
I want to hear all sides, all perspectives, even if we don't agree with it.
That's right. That's right. Nothing wrong with that.
And because you know, in the art of war, the author said, know the enemy.
That's right.
Okay? Because you don't know how they're going to do battle in this thing called life unless you are prepared and understand what their movements are, what their genre is, what their code words are. Okay, that's how we won World War II.
Yes.
We had an entire group of people, the natives of America, break Japanese code, and that's how we won the Pacific Theater. You had geniuses on the other side, and they found out how to break code. You had to understand what they were doing, get into their mindset, so you can come out big.
Right. Let me ask you this. What is your mission, your goals when you're delivering your broadcast? Do you take what you're seeing on a daily basis, or what's troubling you? What's your mission? What's your motivation?
Well, motivation is a couple things, but you know, you hear people say that they got something to say. They don't know how to express themselves. They don't know how to, you know, talk about it. And trust me, talking to people in public settings is something that I've been working on ever since I ran for junior class president in high school. It's been a long time. Anyway, my mission, my objective is to inform people. Okay, because there are some people who just have that staunch attitude of this is right, nothing else. We're gonna stay in this box. It's safe here. Safe ain't gonna help you, girl.
That's right.
Safe ain't gonna help humanity put food on their table. Safe ain't gonna have our kids compete with somebody all over the world. Well, unlike when we were kids, we just had to worry about the man up the street.
That's it.
These kids competing with the world. and
Yes.
they need to be prepared.
Right.
And if their parents aren't understanding that, that's where I come in. That's where I come in. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm gonna tell you some facts.
Keep
You
it
can
real.
check
I
them.
know that.
I'm gonna tell you some truth. I'm gonna tell you some facts. You can check them. You can do whatever. And here's the thing I love about my broadcast, and what also my father told me. That if I'm wrong, I tell you. If I'm wrong, I tell you. And I'm man enough and God's child enough to admit it.
You own it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not gonna put false information out there for somebody to take into a whole nother theology. Like you hear with all these crazy conspiracy theories that we've just went through for 4+ years.
Mm-hmm.
And still and counting. We don't need that. We don't need that. Not as Black America, not as white America, not as America.
That's right.
We don't need that stuff.
Absolutely.
We need something that's going to take us to the next level.
Absolutely. I know, Phil, when I haven't, and there are some days that I just do not have an opportunity to look at the news.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I get on to your broadcast, I know that I'm going to hear what is going on because, like I said, you definitely keep your ear to the ground. What I want to know, though, and like I said, and like you said, learning is something. Knowledge is power. We should learn something every day.
Yep.
Talk to me because, I'm going to tell you, I looked at Petey Green. You made me look Petey Green. I don't think I ever would have maybe known anything about him. But I was like, where does this quote that Phil closes with come from? And then, you say it, you give him credit.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was kind of amazed when I looked Petey Green up. Why Petey Green? What inspired you about Petey Green? Because I mean, he definitely he's a 2-time Emmy Award winner. I mean, people really, I didn't know who he was. Tell us a little bit and why he is an inspiration for you.
Before I go into Petey Green's character, April 4th, 1968.
Yes.
We all know what that day is.
Yep.
That is the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated.
That's right.
Petey Green came on the radio and calmed Washington, D.C. from rioting. Okay? Petey Green, Ralph Waldo Petey Green Jr.
Yes.
He was a dope dealer. He was a prisoner. He was an ex-convict. But he had a voice.
That's right.
And he was given a chance. And his delivery was just like everybody you heard on the street. All the hustlers, all the players, all the everyday common Black people you see in our community. And me and my father used to watch him every Sunday when he had a show on BET years back in the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And I was, back then I was a little young buck, little teenager, just listening. But I always found what he was saying to be profound. I always found what he was saying he had his hand on the pulse of what was going on in society, not just for Black people, but for everybody.
Whether they wanted to admit it or not.
Whether they wanted to admit it or not.
He was real.
Yes.
He was relatable.
Oh yeah.
But again, that's if you wanted to admit it.
Well, all truth is irrelevant unless you're willing to accept the truth.
That's right.
And sometimes that truth might be ugly. It might be a spoonful of cod liver oil. Some of y'all old enough to remember that. But something, for it to work, it's got to go down.
That's right.
You know, there's an old saying that I don't know where I got this from. When I give people advice, I say you can take it, chew it, spit it out, and swallow.
Yeah.
If what I'm giving you is something that ain't right for your life and don't feel right in your soul, spit it out. But if it'll help you grow to another, to be a better person, a better entity of God, swallow it down.
Yes.
Okay. But at least consider.
That's
At least consider.
Yes.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When I looked at Petey Green, I looked at the video clip. Again, I was falling. I was in a chair, and I actually was falling out my chair. Because if you could get past, you know, the way in which he delivered, I mean, it was real. It's real. I mean, whether or not we want to admit it or not, we all have people that have been incarcerated in our family somewhere. It may not be us, but we got somebody. We all have somebody in our families that are dope addicts or drug addicts or whatever you want to term it. Those are the people that we really, you know, we don't want to talk about. We all have people that have been in our family somewhere along the line that's been incarcerated.
Yeah, you know what? I got
ashamed to talk about this.
I got family members that fit all those criteria. But I'm gonna tell you something. The only reason why I don't publicly put their business out there,
yes,
is because they didn't tell me I should.
Right.
Because I don't care if they've been locked up, been on drugs, went to college and got their degree. They, went to the moon. That's my family. I love them.
Right.
And family is something that a lot of people don't understand, that when all else fails, you can always go home. Mm-hmm. When all else fails, home's gonna be there. Home ain't gotta be a building.
That's right. That's right.
Home ain't gotta be a building. Home is something where you feel that you can be nurtured, right, be understood, know where you came from as best you can for some of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that, I love my family. I love them all.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Family is truly, at the end of the day, it counts. It counts it when nothing else does. Unfortunately, though, I also don't see, like when I was a little girl, it was like you were talking about your experience in North Carolina. The thing is, your neighbor, it was like a village. It was like we were family. Oh, yeah. Everybody watched out for each other's kids. You knew that you could go to somebody's house and be okay. But then in the times that we're living in today, I have to be honest. My oldest daughter is 25, almost 26, and I had a problem. When she went, first of all, I didn't let her go everywhere. But heck, my mom didn't either. But again, the block we lived on, everybody knew each other. I even got a butt whooping one day because my grandmother, I snuck out the house, and I really didn't sneak. I did tell her I was going around the corner to my best friend's house. But it was a neighbor who told her she saw me cut through the alley. So when I came back, I got beat. I actually got beat, and I love my grandmother. My grandmother was like my mother. It hurt my soul, but here the neighbor. See, it was a time that you trusted the neighbor. The neighbor was watching out for the kids in the neighborhood.
Well, we were raised when it took a village to raise.
Yes, it took a village.
And like I said, I can quite a few times I come home, call a woman out of her name, and got my butt whooped 4 times before I got home. And then I had to wait till Daddy get home.
That's That's right. It was about respect.
It was about respect.
It was
It
about
was about
respect.
everybody was not only just trying to help you, they were trying to help groom you.
Right.
And you had that multiplicity of beliefs that you were, instilled with. You didn't just get your parents back
Right.
then. Nowadays, you can't trust people enough to believe in them like that. And that's something that's the greatest disaster especially in the Black and minority community that exists today. We're not that community.
Right.
And we need to get back. We honestly need to get back.
You're right.
We can't fix what's going on to or within our community until we fix ourselves.
That's right. That's right. And I think that even in our schools, and as we talk about this subject, even what's going on today, I think that there has been a loss of respect.
Oh, yeah.
I think there was somebody we feared when we were coming up. A respect for life. I think when you look at these headlines, when you look at what is going on, I mean, it's about a loss of respect, not respecting someone else's life.
Well, let me ask you something on that. When it comes down to the loss of respect, and you're right, there is a way decrease in respect level. Weren't we trained to do that?
Yeah.
We were taken away from our culture.
Yeah, that's true.
We were subjected for over 200, 300, 400 years of a system division of who we are and disconnect. And here's what gets under my skin about America. These stereotypes that they bring out, that they create. And I say they, and I'm talking about the majority of America. I don't really want to say Caucasian Americans. There are some good Caucasian people everywhere.
Right.
The one thing I tell people, I'm not a racist, but I can't stand hate.
Right.
And that's within the Black community, with any community.
Right.
Ignorance and hate, two things I can't stand.
Yes.
Because ignorance is something you can fix.
Right.
Hate comes from who you are.
I think it's taught.
Yeah. Well,
it's definitely
for Blacks and minorities. It's not only taught; it was impugned upon us.
Right.
As a survival thing. We
right.
we couldn't get education for hundreds of years. We couldn't stay together as family for hundreds of years. We had to recognize a mistruth about people of this color skin being better than somebody who looked like us.
Yes.
Now over time, there's a resultant effect. And what we see now in these youth today, it's not just the parents' fault. It's not just the fault.
Right.
It's the fact that they have nothing real to connect to.
Absolutely.
And I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, here's a prime example of that. We go to war as a nation in the Mideast. Okay? We go help one sector of the government overthrow the government because it's in our best interest as a nation. Well, we leave.
Mm-hmm.
And leave that country in shambles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But say, hey, if you need us, we'll be back. But different administration, different promise. Well, we won't be back. So now you got people like the Taliban, who used to be who used to be during the 70s, they were called the Mujahideen.
Mm-hmm.
And we backed the Mujahideen. Well, as we left them alone after Russia, after that 10-year war left Russia, they said, well, the United States ain't going to help us no more. So guess what? We're going to turn into this. Now you got the Taliban. Now you got Al Qaeda. Now you got these other offshoots. And we have to pay for that. See, when you oppress a people for so long and take away the happiness that they have been used to for, in case of Afghanistan, centuries, then you create an enemy. You create an enemy. And that's where we can equate that to our teens and youth. Because the American society has said, guess what? For so long, it's the American society has said, you're not good enough. Okay? And that's going to create disrespect. You keep telling me I ain't good enough for something, yeah, I'll be mad at you.
Yes.
I might be PO at you.
Yes.
And that's where it comes from, I think. Just a man with an idea.
Yeah. Phil, I definitely would like, before we go, I have another guest that is due to come on as well, but I know you and I could talk all day.
I think so.
I want to hear really quickly from you your thoughts about the Derek Chauvin verdict.
2021. My thoughts on it is it took too long. See, there were Derek Chauvins before George Floyd.
Right.
My nephew was a victim of one of them. 2010, he was killed by Greensboro police. Does anger set in? Yes. There's a human sense of wanting justice and revenge. I'm sorry. I tell you like this, I'm not selfish with that within my heart. I ask God to work with me with that.
Yes.
But I know my nephew. And Marcus Rayshawn Burnett was one of the gentlest giants I've ever met, I've ever encountered. I helped raise that.
What's his name, Phil?
His name is Marcus Rayshawn Burnett. And to know him, yes, he will give you the shirt off his back. And I knew when the police reports and the news reports came out, they were lying. And I'm finding out new truths even as we speak. So there's always been a Derek Chauvin before. And many lies. See, mine is just one story.
Even the dog got something to say about it.
Yeah, they always got something to say. They hear something.
They say they know, though.
Yeah, but I tell you, when I heard the Derek Chauvin verdict, guilty, the first thing that popped into my mind was Marcus Rayshawn Burnett. He is in heaven right now, saying amen.
It was justice for so many.
Oh yeah, it was a small iconic moment.
Yes.
So many that have come before.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Even though it's just a moment, we got. I savored that moment. It's like that last piece of candy in the bag.
Yes.
I want this one to last. I won't lick it. I want to try to, make it sustain. But see, it's up to America. It's up to the United States. It's up to Joe Biden and this Congress to pass this George Floyd Policing Act.
That's
it's
right.
up to everyday people to get their people to get it passed. It's up to America.
Yes.
America has, as you've heard me say on many occasions, it's up to America to choose where America is going.
That's right.
Because right now it's looking like it's on shaky ground.
We've got to hold the politicians accountable too.
Oh yeah, and
we got to do some different things. We definitely do. This is a small victory, but it's not the end.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just holding the politicians accountable. It's sometimes some of us actually might need to become them politicians. You know, a lot of people want to say, okay, we voted for you for this, we voted for you for that, and then when they don't do it, they want to say, well, this is they give them all kind. Okay, if you really feel that strongly about it, cast your name in that line. I served 3 years, 4 months in the United States military. People who protest, especially about the Second Amendment and all this other crap. Mm-hmm. Unless you're willing to put the uniform on, hush. Because there's no way, there's a question now, the weapons of war belong on American streets? Do you believe we are asking this question? We got multiple deaths by AR-15s, multiple deaths by semi-automatic weapons, AK-47s. This is stuff you used to see on the news when Walter Cronkite was broadcasting from Vietnam.
Yes.
What are they doing in Aurora? What are they doing on the streets of Atlanta? What are they doing? Period.
And sometimes I believe it's the genocide that's going to wipe.
It's an allowed genocide.
Yeah.
It isn't allowed.
They know where it's coming from, but when they made guns legal, I'm not sure that they really understood, but I'm sure they did not make these.
Well, see, here's the thing. Remember in '94 they banned assault weapons.
Right.
But it was only for 10 years. And as soon as that 10 years was up, hey, let's get our guns back. Let's mount up. Now you got people people in Texas with ranches, and all they got is guns every 5 feet. All kind of stuff. One, to me, it's a shortcoming cover-up. And two, half of them don't even know how to use them.
Yes.
You don't have and then
they need a class.
Then not only do they need a class,
target range.
They need to be psychologically evaluated.
Oh yeah.
You should never be allowed to put your hand on a weapon like that.
Yes.
Unless you've had military training and I stress and if you had some kind of psychological evaluation, so you don't go out there and kill 20 kids.
And that's what's happening.
And it's sad. It's scary.
Innocent lives are being taken.
It is sick.
And this is part of I'm gonna say a pandemic, but this gun, I don't know. It is a plague. It's out of control. It's like we live in the wild, wild west.
It is a plague. It is a plague upon the land. Yes. And it's up to the leadership and us as, I don't really like to say it's just up to the leadership, right? Because we are the leadership. The way this nation's ran, that president is my employee.
Yes.
That senator is my employee. That policeman in the street is my employee. And if you're not doing the job, you got to go.
That's right.
We
don't realize how powerful our votes are, our voice.
I think we're finding out.
Yes, slowly but surely, mm-hmm. we're finding out. Phil, I want to talk more to you. Will you allow us? Will you come back? We're going to be here, I believe, on next Friday. Will you come back and talk? So much you and I could spend hours talking about. I mean, I want to get your take really quickly before I go to my next guest, Makia Bryant. What were your thoughts? I didn't see it. Let me tell you, I did not watch the video. And the reason I didn't, my brother was taken by gun violence back in 2000. And you're talking about a good guy. My brother was a good guy. And it was a really sad situation because he was delivering a book bag to a young lady. We had a restaurant at that time, and her boyfriend that was a number of years older, yes, he was a suitor.
Hmm.
So he shot my brother 4 times. And when I tell you, I think about my brother every day. People do not understand
Oh, I
when
understand.
you take, I know you do,
Hmm.
but when you take a life from someone, you're impacting the entire family. It is
Oh,
something that, it's an ongoing thing.
it is a
And
proportionate wave of
so
sorrow.
I didn't look at the video. I really try not to watch videos. Really, I have walked out of theaters, especially when my brother was first killed. I I just couldn't. It was a movie that came on. I don't even remember the name, but I had to get up and I walked out because there was an actual scene with gun violence where there was a young black man on the floor, and it just went all through me. And so I have not watched the video of Micaiah Bryant. And have you?
I've watched it at least 20 times.
Wow.
I've slowed it down, and I made mention of this the other day in my broadcast. My viewpoint is going to piss people off. I will say this: if there was something called a police, I don't like the term justifiable homicide.
Yeah.
Because that's what they ruled, in the Greensboro cops' murder of my nephew. I don't like that. I will say this, that police officer did what he had to do. We as black people, and I made mention of this the other day also, it's not the fact that we hate he had to do it. We hate the fact that he did.
Mm-hmm.
We hate the fact that he did, because everybody wants to say what they would do.
You never know.
You could do this. You could get a taser. You can no. If that man had not shot, there'd be 2 black girls dead right now. Because unfortunately, the young lady had a knife and she was approaching another girl, and she was going to stab her.
Wow. I had heard that.
Yeah,
and I also heard her family was out there. And I understand, Phil.
That's my alarm system.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand the family was out there.
Yes.
And if so, I guess I question, this is the same question that I ask. And then my mom is a retired Chicago police officer, and she asks us the same question, because we talk about rogue policemen. We talk about policemen that are using excessive force, and they were not trained to do this. But we also question why the police that are standing on the side do nothing.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch the video, but I did hear there were family members out. So I guess I just kind of asked this question. If that was my daughter, I don't really know what I would do, but I would really like to believe I would be trying to de-escalate the situation. And I know that policemen are taught de-escalation tactics. My mom told me yesterday there's a red man tactic that is taught. And she actually, said you put your hands over the person's ears, and you have to have 2 people, and you try to go in. I don't know, but I'm just wondering, would things have turned out differently if there was not a reaction rather than a response to de-escalate this situation? I don't know.
From what I witnessed, from my training, from every portion of being. See, I've got people that were police officers. Matter of fact, one of my nephews, let's just say he works at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up, and the police. There's a police officer who was our friend, our family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know he was one of the ones that whooped my butt. I ain't gonna lie. But from what I saw in that video on multiple angles, multiple times, slowed it down. There was no time. There was no time. Not only that, I'm go further, and I made mention of this in my broadcast the other day. If that's my child,
Mm-hmm.
if that's my child, and people are attacking her, one, she never got close to him. See, we also have to be accountable.
Right.
We also have to be accountable. Because one, when that police got there, the only person he'd have shot is me.
Mm.
Because I'd have been tackling my child.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see my child leave here before we ain't supposed to do that.
It's inhumane. It's inhuman. The Bible says that.
Yeah, and I understand. People are angry. People are marching. It ain't like it's not like the North Carolina case where they're still waiting on the video.
I know, right? And thank God for the video that they did have.
And thank God that they told the truth immediately, because that's so important. Because
Right.
I'm telling you, the first reports I heard about that I responded to was 3. They said that cop got out the car and started popping.
Wow.
But you watch the video, the man said, stop, get down, get down, get down, get down. Prior to putting his weapon in firing position. Okay. They also don't tell you too much about the father kicking one of the attackers in the head, one of the other girls in the head while she was on the ground. They don't say that. They don't want to focus on that. Focus on it all. Just like that cop had to do in a split second. You had to focus on everything that was going on, before coming to a judgment. Did she deserve to die? No one deserves to die.
That's right.
Don Lemon talked about this last night. He had a guest on, and I can't remember if Don Lemon or his guest said, deserving to die. No child, nobody deserves to die.
Nobody deserves it. Nobody.
But did the cop do the right thing? Unfortunately, I have to say yes. I have to say yes. Although I feel the pain of my ancestors when I see anybody of our culture get killed. It goes back. It just goes back, and we wish it didn't happen. We wish it could be different, but we also have to understand truth is truth. Like I said the other day, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
2 wrongs don't make a right. It never has, and it never will. Phil, I'm going to again invite you back. I hope you'll join us. You and I could talk all day, and I love it because we're very much on the same page. I just want you to say it for me. Say it for me like you said in the end of your broadcast. Just say it. I just love that saying and how you end. And that is how I want to end our interview today.
Okay. Y'all know me, I say it to the hot, I say it to the cold. I tell it to the young, and I tell it to the old. Don't want no laughing, no crying, and most of all, no signifying. Those words by the late, great Petey Green. Y'all be well. God's will.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much for joining Real Talk. We'll see you back here real soon.
I'll be back whenever you want.
Have a good evening, Phil.
You as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Our next guest, boy, I just enjoyed talking to Phil. We could talk all day. I have another guest a young man that I have watched grow up. I have watched evolve, and I am really, 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 really proud of him. His parents have instilled education. They have instilled the right things, and he has certainly taken off in a direction that I think we're going to hear more about him. My next guest is a former John Marshall Law School student. He is in the workforce development industry. That's what he does. That's what he works in today. And he is taking on a true task. And I think it takes courage, and he's bold. And what I like about it is he's young and he's vibrant. I want to welcome Michael Anthony Thompson Jr. to the Real Talk. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I very much enjoyed your previous guest. That was a great conversation.
Thank you. And you know what? I'm sorry we went a little bit over, but it was important to hear some of the things that he had to say. I think it's going to help in our conversation, and it's going to top off a lot of topics that we're going to get to. Would you tell my viewers, those who know nothing about you, who is Michael Anthony Thompson Jr.?
Well, I would say really first and foremost, I'm somebody who's from the South Side of Chicago, born and raised there. That's my pride. Graduate of King High School in 2008. After I left King High School, I went on to the University of Illinois, where I engaged in a lot of different sort of student-led activities, including Big Brothers Big Sisters, where I really found a passion for service. During undergrad, I joined the United States Marine Corps, graduated from Officer Candidate School. And then after undergrad, I immediately went on to law school. And really, with the passion for service that was pushed on me and really embedded in me by my family, including you, Cousin Merle, but really my parents and everyone in general, I kind of searched in law school looking for that place where I could be of most service. So starting in the Federal Public Defender's Office, doing a lot of post-conviction work and working on sentencing memorandums and things of that nature. Then I went into immigration with our International Human Rights Clinic, supporting asylum claims for Syrian refugees. And in both of those situations, while we did really amazing work and got a chance to help people, I kind of felt like I was in a sinking ship throwing out water, right? Just constant battle after battle. And, you can win a few battles, but just where does it end? How do we stop it at the source, right? I finally got an opportunity to work with the John Marshall Law School Restorative Justice Project, where I got an opportunity to teach restorative practices to students and teachers and administrators. And it gave me an opportunity to teach other people how to take equity and, stakehold in their own lives, right? In that program, the students were given an opportunity to identify a school rule or policy that they felt disenfranchised them in some way. So a school rule or policy that they disagreed with, right? And we hear that from, young people all the time. I don't like this rule. I don't like that rule, right? Well, let's quantify that. Let's articulate that. Why don't you like it, right? And what is your alternative? So they identified a school rule or policy that they felt disenfranchised them, and then created a new rule that accomplished the goal the school needed to achieve, but didn't harm the students in the same way. And they were able to see a very clear-cut way of how I can make change in my own life through a clear process and a clear path. And that is really my main motivation for doing this now, is trying to give more equity to community stakeholders and community leaders who really know what's best for the people that they live around.
You are running. You have announced your candidacy.
Mhm.
You are running for the U.S. Congressman for the first district.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, like I said, the first district covers the south side of Chicago and the south suburbs. It's a district that I'm proud of. And unfortunately, and a lot of what I've seen, especially working in the nonprofit industry and the service industry, I say this on my website, I have seen arrogance, apathy, and a lack of connection to the community, right? When it comes to arrogance, you see a lot of theory as opposed to real world application and what are the real things that people do on a daily basis that improve their lives as opposed to another large government program. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Democrat, right? I believe that government can, be a force for good in people's lives. But unfortunately, especially Chicago being an example, we've seen a Democratic Party that practices its own version of trickle down economics, where we engage in large public-private partnerships where you see a few salaries for executives or major partners in economic development, and then a swath of minimum wage salaries and no addressing or any type of solution to systemic issues in the communities that people come from, right? The average commute for someone who lives in the first district is a 40-minute drive, right? People shouldn't have to drive 40 minutes to go to their job, right? And so building things where people live and making sure that there's a focus and a connection to where they live is really important to me. And so, like I said, that arrogance, that apathy, that lack of connection, those are things that I would hope to fight against if I'm honored enough to be in that position.
You, I'm sure, have a lot to think about, but your platform, I know it's a little early, and I know you've talked a little bit about, the arrogance, the apathy, the loss of connection. What is your platform? I know you're going to address these things, but what is your platform? How is that shaping?
Yeah, really. My platform is three-pronged, right? So it's about education, job development, and public safety. Really, whenever you go into a community, if you have good jobs and good schools, it's usually pretty safe, right? If a community is safe and has good jobs, they usually have good schools. They have good jobs, and it's you can put that equation however you want it. And so again, with that focus on community, improving schools, improving job prospects where people live, and having that economic development in their own neighborhoods, in their backyard, I think that's the best way to then get at that third prong of public safety. Because, and right now, current events are even more evidence of this, that you can't solve public safety with a gun, unfortunately. And it's something that we've tried numerous times since the inception of our country, and it has yet to work, because all it's really led to, or the result of, is an incarcerated population far larger than any other modern country in the world right now.
You are heading in the direction that I would like to go in for a few minutes, and I'm sure that you did get a chance to hear a little bit of our guests before. But I wanted to save, I didn't want to get a lot into this with my guests before. I wanted to get into it a little bit more with you and tackle some of these topics. Our hometown, Chicago, as you know, has certainly led the headlines. Police brutality, gun violence, senseless shootings, carjackings, how and what would be your approach? And do you think that the approach is, some people say, well, I would do this, I would do that. I don't think it's a one solution approach. What would be your approach to addressing some of these issues and in crisis in some cases? We're calling them pandemics in
Right.
other cases.
Definitely. No, and I think you want to understand, right? It's not one solution. I think where you start, that beginning first step, is really a recognition that people are hurting, right? Harm only begets harm, violence begets violence. A lot of the criminality that we see, it didn't come from a vacuum, right? No one's born with the idea that I want to steal a car today. No one's born with the idea that I want to rob someone today. They lived a life, a set of experiences, sometimes a set of traumas that put them in a position where this became an alternative that is a right path for me, right? And so when it comes to truly addressing what I go back to the source, right? What is the source of the issue? I think about the fact that in this country, Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton, recently published some data where he said that in this country, we spend about $107 billion on policing compared to about 17 million on public housing nationally, right? Like that's ridiculous. There are 15 states that spend about 27,000 more per person in prison versus they do on a student per student in their state, right? If we got at some of those core issues of funding and investment into communities, my grandparents are graduates of Parker High School. And if anyone's from the South Side of Chicago, they know Parker High School is now Robeson High School in the West Englewood area. Parker was once one of the best high schools in the city of Chicago, majority Black, white, or other, right? And it wasn't until you saw a divestment from education and a more investment to the war on drugs in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where Parker turned into Robeson and became the school that we know it to be now. I think if we, again, went back to some of those investments that we used to already do in this country in education, really spawning from the National Defense and Education Act from the Eisenhower administration in 1958, we can cure a lot of these issues that we see in our communities every day. And again, it starts with the schools, it starts with jobs, right? Having teachers that live in the community, having coaches that live in the community, nurses, lunch staff, professional staff, people who can provide occupational training certificates, vocational training, all of that is part of that village.
Development too.
Exactly.
And that's part of what you do. I want to ask this question. Mm-hmm. The Derek Chauvin, you have a legal background, the Derek Chauvin verdict. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm not licensed to practice, never practiced criminal law professionally, but again, watching the case in the news and absorbing what I saw from the evidence. There's in the law, there's always a moral question and a legal question, right? And morality and legality are two different things. The moral question, anyone who watches that video and sees anything but someone who committed murder intentionally, I think is someone who is dealing with a lot of other psychological trauma or harm in their life.
Put it nicely.
Right. And then from a legal perspective, based on what they said about the Minnesota state law and the substantial factor and the number of witnesses that came forward with medical testimony, I think that was also very clear to the jury that the prosecution did a good job of explaining the law. We saw that at the end, there were no jury notes. They didn't have any questions for the judge, no questions for the prosecution, which, can be rare when you have a complex sort of rule of law like that, where there is a lot of ifs and ands, and you have to really get into the nitty-gritty details of, what someone's intent may have been and all of the circumstantial evidence that can lead to intent. That can be confusing for people in a jury, but for them to not have any questions, that just shows how well of a job the prosecution did in making it very clear and spelling it out to them.
Do you think that it is the start or will put us on the trajectory of police reform?
Well, I think the verdict is more so accountability, right? And as your previous guest said, we haven't seen that too often in this country for a lot of different reasons. And there are a lot of individuals that are hesitant to call it justice. And it reminds me of a Malcolm X quote that he has where he talks about, if you stick a knife in my back, right, and then never address the wound, but just say you're sorry, right? What you have to do to really prove that you're sorry, prove that you apologize, build that equity, you have to pull the knife out, you have to try to stitch the wound up, you have to let the wound heal, you have to put Neosporin on it, antibacterial on it, and then once it's fully healed, now we've gotten to a place of justice and equity. And Malcolm X famously said, America still doesn't even recognize the knife is there, right? I think this verdict is maybe recognition that the knife is there, right? And through more actions and more changes, we can start to see the wounds really heal.
I agree with you. And, you know, it's foundational, it's systemic. You know, it's a start. You know, we're going to wait and see what the sentencing looks like.
Yeah.
How do you, and I know it's probably, you've answered it a little bit, how do we solve police brutality? What is your thoughts on that? How do we solve it? You know, is there, you know, I know it's not, again, a one solution resolve, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about police reform? Police brutality is it's headlining our news, and not just here, but across the states, across the globe.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think from a federal perspective, you can put legislation out there that can, fund local police departments that do the right things. I think at a deeper level, and this kind of leads into the Ma'Khia Bryant situation, I think we have to take a really critical look at the concept of policing in and of itself and the role of armed police in our society and in our communities. You have a lot of localities that are experimenting of looking, for instance, civil infractions such as tail light or something of that nature, right? Is that necessary for a police officer with an armed weapon to approach you to make that stop? Or can we just use the cameras in the city to just take a picture of your license plate and send another ticket in the mail, right? There are numerous projects such as the SMART teams in LA, where if they have a mental health call, they will send an armed officer with a mental health professional who is unarmed. And that mental health professional goes in with their de-escalation tactics and ability to work with the person. When you talk about their firearms training, a lot of officers are taught to shoot center mass. A lot of their training teaches, protection at all costs. Is there a different psychology that can be developed there where they are taught to shoot to disable or not to feel the psychology of protecting self at all costs? And there's plenty of statistics and data out there that while policing is certainly a dangerous job, it may not, the rhetoric that we have around it does not fit with a lot of the policies that we have when it comes to protecting police and our community.
Yes, I agree. You know, as I was listening to you speak, and this is something that I feel is really important. All policemen are not bad, as you may agree. They're not, and I think the picture.
They're people.
Yeah, they're people.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you know, my mom is a retired Chicago police officer, and I know that she is not a bad person. I'm not just saying that because she's my mom. I remember just hearing many stories, that she would tell me about, some stops and having Caucasian officers that would go to some of these calls, and that she made it her business, especially if she was free, to go to those calls also. And she learned that from a field officer, that was very important to do. And she said that she learned it, and the reason that she did it is she asked him, well, why do you make sure you try to get on all these calls? And he said, because I want to make sure that our people are being treated fairly. And so that's kind of alarming. She's been retired now about almost 17 years, but yet we have some of the same foundational things that are happening. And we need policemen in our areas that look like us. I'm not saying that we cannot have, because again, all white policemen, any kind of different race policemen are not bad, because as my mom taught me growing up, your title does not make you. You are a person before you are that. So all policemen are bad, just like all people are not bad. So my question is to you, what is your stance and your position about defunding the police?
Yeah, so I think that there's certainly a critical objective look we can take at responsible public safety budgeting. right? When you look at the recent CARES Act funding that was given to the city of Chicago, I saw an interesting graphic where it showed that about 70% of that funding was given to the police department and a very small fraction to social services. And again, pointing at the research, you can head off a lot of criminality issues with things like universal pre-K, right? Life outcomes are drastically different for someone that is involved in universal pre-K versus someone who's not. Now, I'm not saying that if you just have universal pre-K, you will stop all crime, but it is a mitigating factor, right? So how many of those dollars could have went towards some of those, again, solving the source of the problem, getting to the source of the problem, as opposed to continually investing in something that, again, we've only seen limited results from at best. So when I think of defund the police, and it's interesting, I read a DoD paper where they talked about military workforce personnel ratios, right? And in the military, they actually keep a 20% combat and 80% combat support ratio, right? That 80% combat support, there are healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, lawyers, motor T, mechanics, all types of job development, training skills that translate into the civilian world in other ways. You can have a local police department, and your average local police department is actually flipped. You have 70%, close to 70% nationally, patrol officers, and then about 30% support staff, but that support staff mostly fits into an admin sort of function, right? If you had a more equitable diversity of a workforce that could provide more social services, more mental health services, along with a specialized force, a smaller specialized force that can execute search and arrest warrants, do better threat assessments, maybe have better technology for those threat assessments. So that way they know they're not walking, if they are walking into a dangerous situation, they can know the best ways to mitigate collateral damage. Those are deep, not just reforms, but transformations of police departments, looking at their overall workforce that still leaves a set of individuals there that can protect people and engage in dangerous situations, but the majority of which is focused on solving problems of crime before they even happen, right? So supporting those universal pre-K programs, supporting mental health programs for homeless individuals, supporting drug addiction programs for individuals who are suffering from alcoholism or other issues, opioid addiction and things of that nature. Those are the ways you really solve public safety by, forgive the violence, cutting the snake off by the head, right? Getting at the core of the issue.
Yeah. I think that your approach is a good one, and it is something definitely statistically, and the data is showing that people are leaning to. It also comes down to something that you do in workforce development and training. And training is very important. And I think that there needs to be more funding, as you said. We need more funding to train, to better train, and to make sure that our communities are better prepared. The people in our communities are better prepared. You talked about the long drives to work, but they are just people who are not career ready. Some that never graduate from high school,
Right.
some that do, they escape through the cracks that, I'm still amazed today to run into people who cannot read.
Yeah.
And it's real. It's real. People think that's a joke. And I think I mentioned it to one of my daughters and they were like, really? But there are people who don't even know how to fill out an application. Let's talk about what you do and how you're going to apply that. And you've already basically said it. You've already basically in your approach to when you sit in this U.S. district congressman seat, because we're speaking it. We're believing it. And so talk to me about that in terms of workforce development.
Yeah, no, one thing I've always talked about with workforce development when it comes to helping someone find a job, right? The very simple act of helping someone find a job. Someone can't get a job if they can't interview, right? You can't interview if you can't write a resume. You can't write a resume if you can't write a sentence. You can't write a sentence if you don't appreciate education.
Right.
And it's very difficult to appreciate education when you dealt with social, emotional trauma stemming from childhood and life experiences, right? So workforce development is really the working with an individual, meeting them where they are in life, identifying barriers that are keeping them from finding employment in a career path that they would enjoy, and then through the provision of supportive services, helping them eliminate those barriers. So let's say I have a hypothetical individual that was formerly incarcerated and they would like to become a truck driver, right? That's a very likely hypothetical. That individual may come in, they may say, hey, I don't have a job, I don't have money, I don't have any transportation. I live with my friend, I'm couch surfing right now. How can you help me? So we'll determine their eligibility. If they're eligible, we'll get them enrolled into a federal fund called WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And then using WIOA funding, you can provide rental assistance, transportation assistance, childcare assistance, all of those supportive services that someone can use to then get, and including a voucher for training and receiving an occupational certificate. So, we provide someone those supportive services, we possibly get them tutoring or educational support services. And then once they're ready to engage in that training or ready to be placed in full-time employment, we do their best to work with them to find those jobs, even leveraging opportunities with employers directly. So using my hypothetical about an individual who's justice involved, the federal government has the federal bonding program that extends $5,000 in liability risk to employers, as well as the work opportunity tax credit program that also ensures employers risk when it comes to hiring individuals who are justice involved. And it's totally free to an employer, right? So there are amortizing tools that we can use to then incentivize employers to want to hire someone with a justice involved background. And that is a way where, again, I take someone, meet them where they are, try to address some of those social and emotional trauma experiences that they've gone through. And again, nothing's a silver bullet, nothing's 100%, but when you can put someone in a better position to do better, they tend to do better. The adage, I've always liked and disliked the adage, teach a man to fish, because my second question to it is, all right, if you give a man a fish, they'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish, they'll eat for the rest of their life. But if they don't have a fishing pole in the first place, how are they going to fish, right? So I can teach them, but then I also need to give them the resources of a fishing pole to then go on and live, their ends, right? And so that's where really workforce development takes a holistic look at somebody and how can we give them a fishing pole?
Right. And I think that skill set, bringing that to the first U.S. District Congressman seat is going to be vital. It's vital. We have to make sure that people have the tools and the resources. So, that in itself is something that people say, but they often forget about that. People make promises, on the campaign trips of what they're going to do, what they're not going to do. But the foundation of what you have, the skill sets you already have, I think is going to be very, very vital to making that position a position that you can maximize the highest potential for your constituents. Listen, our President Joe Biden said in his speech on the day of the Chauvin verdict that he's calling on Congress. That made me think about you. That he's calling on Congress to act and pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. I know you know about this act, but once you're elected, again, he was calling on Congress, and that stuck with me because he was talking about from the time this shooting occurred till the actual trial, it's been almost a year. It's been too long. And so he's saying that there's legislation that's sitting there. He needs Congress to act. What are your thoughts around that? And police, we're back to police reform, but we know that there are going to be more bills that are needed to address this issue.
Definitely. I mean, I think the Justice in Policing Act is a step in the right direction. It's a pretty comprehensive bill, so I have a few notes I do want to kind of list out. So, I mean, it facilitates federal enforcement of constitutional violations, specifically use of force. It lowers the criminal intent standard, which is very important when you talk about what was somebody's frame of mind versus, was it an accident versus intentional? It limits qualified immunity, which is very important, but it does so in private civil actions, right? So still, where's qualified immunity from a criminal perspective? I would be interested to see maybe more language from that perspective. But it also, authorizing DOJ to do investigations, it engages in a lot of great steps. But again, where I think we can do more for our communities, not just police departments, but for our communities, is how can localities, cities like Chicago use their police department to work with communities better, use city resources to, decentralize power in their governments. It doesn't really speak to anything that helps people, right? And that's where I would like to see more of an interest or more of a focus is how can we decentralize power in a way that helps people to be more of a stakeholder in their own situation?
Because when people, I think, are invested in the community, they tend to care more about where they are. It's something that sometimes when you bring an outsider, and there have even been talks about this at first dealing with when they were trying to fill the role of the Chicago police superintendent, bringing somebody from the outside. Sometimes, it could be a good thing. You can get a new set of eyes, different thought processes. But at the same time, when you're invested in a community, you tend to care more. And I'm not saying that he is or he isn't, but it's just a thought that comes to mind. You're running for the first U.S. District Congressman seat. Right now, Bobby Rush sits in that seat. He has for a number, about over 2 decades, I believe, since 1993, if my information is correct. People would say those are some pretty big shoes to fill. Tell our viewers why they should vote for Michael Anthony Thomspon Jr.
Well, first, I would say when it comes to Bobby Rush, I think he's had a great, career being a Black Panther in his time. I think a lot of people have seen the movie Judas and the Black Messiah that recently came out and probably saw how his character was featured. I think it takes a lot of courage to do what he did at that time. At the same token, I do believe that every generation has to have a changing of the guard. And a lot of the programs that him and the Black Panther Party envision are things that I've looked at, not just from a historical perspective, but how can we make this relevant again in present day? So you'll see, featured on my website, school dinner programs, right? Feeding the community, more resources in the community for education and workforce development and job development. And again, just that self-determination. Again, those are themes that are very important to me that I learned from studying individuals like him and others who participated in the civil rights movement and the Black arts movement and the Black Power movement of the 70s. And so now I want to see that a lot of those themes revisited in ways where we can take the next step of action. Dr. King himself talked about the civil rights movement being a first step. There was an economic civil rights that needed to happen next, an economic revolution of how we looked at capitalism and power in this country. Again, those are extensions of that movement that I believe have been forgotten about for far too long, and I would like to see revisited. So in talking about Bobby Rush, again, it's not necessarily I want to compete. I am going to compete in this race, and I do look at him as a competitor, but I don't view him as an adversary, and I don't want this to be adversarial.
That's good.
But I do believe that where there's a contrast is that I'm not just young, but working with WIOA, working with community development block grant funding, understanding how these pieces of legislation move through Congress, move through certain administrative offices such as HUD or DOL, understanding how those resources are then distributed on the ground, right? And what are the barriers to them being the most effectual as possible. I mentioned before with workforce development, there's a whole holistic process of, getting someone not just career ready with their resume review and not just job ready with understanding the occupational skills involved, but a whole
Right.
mental health and educational background. Those are things that I think for far too long, people in positions in Congress have forgot to think about when it comes to helping their constituents.
I agree wholeheartedly. You mentioned something, Mike. People may say you're young. They may say you don't have the experience. You've kind of already answered this, but what would you say to those people who may be doubting?
Well, I would, and actually, my wife is a big credit. My wife's not a lawyer; she's a chiropractor, but she actually did some research, and she had found some really good constitutional law history about the United States House of Representatives and how, historically speaking, it was always the congressional House and our federal government that was meant for younger people, people who didn't have political backgrounds, to come in and
Yep.
make their voices heard and put the community's voices first. It's the reason why the age requirement for the House is 25 versus 32 for the Senate, right? Because it's that place where an individual goes and they represent their community and they can learn some into the job. And to your point earlier about my experience, while yes, I have worked in supporting communities and worked in supporting individuals and using federal resources and government resources to accomplish those goals, there's still a lot of learning to do. And I'm sure there are a lot of congressmen that have been there for years. They're still learning. But I don't think that inexperience for this seat is something that is a detriment for someone like me who is ready and willing to learn and can learn.
And I agree with you. This, not to be funny, but we look at who just left the White House, right? Not to be funny. I mean, really, you're more
Right.
prepared. You're more prepared to do that job than what that person. We were not going to spend a lot of time on that. Tell people, for the viewers and potential voters, tell them how they can donate or how they can support you. Where can they go to learn more about Michael Anthony Thompson Jr.?
Yeah. So yeah, the website is votethompson2022.com. And yeah, the website has all the information there you need to donate and support. But really, where we feel like we can get the biggest support and where I would love to see more people show up is our people's assemblies. And essentially, a people's assembly is an opportunity for a group of individuals to vote on the topics they would like to discuss and then have a discussion with me about those topics. It's a democratic way of hearing from constituents and making sure that their voices are heard. And it can be hyper local. If you want to talk about potholes and trash collection, more than willing to talk about that. If you want to talk about the Green New Deal and tax code, we can definitely talk about that too. It's about what's important to the people who live in the community.
I just want to make sure for our viewers, did you, and I just confirm this for me. You said vote Thompson22.
2022.
Oh, 2022.
Mhm.
Okay. I
No
missed
problem.
that. 2022, because we're going to put something, make sure that people can see this later who pick up the recording, who could not join us live. Do you have any last comments, last thoughts? I think personally, not because you're just my cousin, but I learned so much just in talking to you. And, do you have anything that you want to say that we
I do actually. No, and with your previous guest, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry about that.
Oh, you didn't. Go ahead.
No, but with your previous guest, you had discussed the Nakia Bryant situation a little bit, and there was one sort of like point that I really wanted to make, where he said that in viewing the video and viewing all of the elements of what happened that day, that the police officer did the right thing. Right, he didn't want to use the term justifiable homicide. I agree with his decision to not use that term. I'm not a fan of that term either. But what I would say is, again, taking a critical look at our society, an objective look at the way we choose to live amongst one another. If the rules on paper say that that was okay, what is it about the rules themselves that we need to address, right? Again, going back to what we talked about, what life circumstances could have been placed in Ma'Khia Bryant's path where those young ladies would have never came to attack her, where her and her family could have lived in a community where you had more neighbors, to your question earlier, that may have reported or said something earlier on, right? What are those community elements that we can make sure that we address, again, getting to the source of issues before we have to litigate the death of another child? So that's where I have again, officers have tough jobs. They have to make split-second decisions in situations. But the fact that we put them in certain situations in and of themselves is a question for us in society of whether or not that's appropriate.
We have a lot, I think, of conversations to continue and to talk about. I often think, I have different thoughts, different opinions sometimes. And all these cases, as you know, you got to look at it as a case by case. But I don't want it, and I think that the message kind of gets a little blurry. What I don't want is this. I don't want people to think we don't need policemen, because we do. And the thing is, if somebody is breaking in your house today, if something is happening that is totally out of control, who are you going to call? It's not going to be the Ghostbusters. Really? Come on. We're going to pick up the phone. I have had to pick up the phone. I hate to admit it. I've had to pick up the phone to restore peace in my home when I had a family member come who would not leave, who was threatening violence. I had never had to call the police. But when you ask someone to leave and you can't restore that peace yourself, you don't want to result, because somebody may be looking at this and may say, oh, yeah, well, I know what I would do if somebody was breaking in my home. I'll go get, well, we can get into a whole bunch of scenarios here. But the truth is, the majority of us would pick up the phone and call 911. We might go get our bat and whatever while we're doing it. But we're going to pick up the phone and call 911. We do need the police. And I think that there's a message here that I think can get really distorted, because you got a group of people who feel we don't need them. A friend of mine told me the other day, policing really came from slavery days. And the masters and, having people to look, and it was our people. And, I get all of that. I get history lesson. I get all of it. But the thing is, again, not all policemen are bad. They are people. And we really do need them. What do you want to say?
So again, when you look at systems, right, you have to separate people from systems, right? So to your point, not all people who are policemen are bad. Some of them use discretionary power in wrong ways. To your anecdote about, policing being an ancestry of slavery, right? The New York Times 1619 Project did a really good, journalistic research on sort of that history and how even so modern day accounting, right? They a lot of people are very weary of what they call critical race theory, seeing race in everything, right? But history doesn't lie. The first QuickBooks came from slavery. It was a book that was written out that allowed people to be able to track property and create a lot of what our modern day accounting techniques are now, right? The first sort of automated way to track the buying and selling of goods was created during slavery, right? And even when you talk about the initial slave catchers and resources that were given to those slave catchers, that has a connection to what we see today in modern day policing. Now, does every police officer have to answer for that history? I think it's unfair to have a Black police officer answer for a system that was created hundreds of years prior to them. But Washington Post as well has an article about the reimagining of public safety. And to your point, if someone breaks into your house, you need to call a service to stop that from happening and restore your peace. When that service arrives, does it look like policing as we see it today? And that's the question that I think a lot of the younger generation is trying to pose. Now, do they do it in the most artful way? A lot of people would say no, right? But when you can peel back a lot of the real anger and the real hurt behind their rhetoric, you can see that, again, there's data in how we engage in responsible public safety budgeting with the inequities between the money given to police versus the money given to social services. There's research, again, going back to the DoD report and some of the initiatives that are being led by municipalities across the country, specifically LA SMART teams, right? Pairing an armed officer, a traditional officer, with a mental health professional that's not armed and not traditionally trained as an officer at all, but trained as a professional mental health worker, right? Using those types of, like I said, changes and transformations in police departments, I think are going to go a lot further than continuing to do the same thing that we've already done before.
Yeah, because we definitely have to do something different. And I think, if not, it's like being insane, that definition of being insane, continue to do the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. So we have to do something different. And I think we're on our way, in many ways. I think that we are. I looked at the, of course, the results of the election. We're seeing that, and the White House is definitely the trajectory of where our country is going, as I said before, is in a much better direction. Locally, we've got some things that we have to do, but across the globe, this is just not an area. Chicago is not just an area, as we saw in Minnesota. Dante Wright was buried this past week. And I was looking at some information of how many people in the state of Illinois, their tags are expired, because the state offices are closed. And so when you begin to think about that and you wrap your arms and your hands around, how could a traffic stop result over some expired tags, result and end in death?
Yep.
So it's a lot of work to do.
Yep.
And I think that somebody like you, Michael Anthony Thompson Jr., is cut out to do the work. Not only did you give respect to Bobby Rush, but you are correct. There are things today that need to be addressed a little differently, because we're dealing with a different world. We're dealing not so much world as people are different. We were talking about that earlier in the show about respect, the respect for loss of life. I'm not sure that people really get that and understand that pulling triggers, and when you're firing and spraying bullets, and how it can hit innocent people, the 1-year-old girl on the drive, the 7-year-old, and we know that there were other things and other factors tied into this.
Right.
But we got a lot going on. But I think that you are more than prepared to take this on, because every day, I don't care if you're the smartest person in the world, we're always learning. We should be anyway, correct?
No, only the fool doesn't seek knowledge.
That's right. I want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Are you going to join us? Are you going to come back? We're going to keep up with you.
I'll come back.
Election day is what day?
So the primary is March 15th, 2022.
Right. So we have a lot of time between now and then, and I'm gonna ask you back. I may ask you back because I want to keep up with the work that you're doing, and I want to keep up with your campaign. And people, again, can go to, we want to make sure, votethompson2022.com, and that's 2022.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining Real Talk. I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate just your vibrance, your energy that's coming through this screen. And I am going to say that I believe you are the next, because Bobby Rush hasn't even announced if he's running again or not. But you are the next U.S. First District Congressman of the United States. And I thank you so much for joining us here on Real Talk.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Have a good evening. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Viewers, as you can see, we've had some excellent guests here today, and we've talked about issues that are truly making headlines, not just in Chicago, but they are making headlines across the globe. The conversation continues. This is why I wanted to do this show. I wanted to bring people, everyday people that may not get the opportunity until a later time or ever to speak and to have a voice. I believe, as I put this show together, I believe, and I've lived my life by it. And Dr. King has come up a number of times. And as I've shared, and it's an episode that you haven't seen yet, I built this show around it, that our lives begin to end when we become silent about those things that matter. And we're going to keep addressing the issues. We're going to keep addressing current issues. We're going to keep looking at racist, Democratic, Republican, whatever the situation, and whatever offices, whatever they're talking about, whatever the buzz is, join us here on Real Talk. I thank you very much. Our program was a little longer today than I would have liked it to have been, but you can't stop good conversation. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next week on Real Talk.